Welcome everyone to another cartoon commentary, aka Toy Guys Talking, and today joining me is Mega J Retro from the Mega J Retro YouTube channel. Jay, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks, Michael. How's it going, everybody?
And we're taking a look at RoboCop. Do you want to watch RoboCop today?
I want to watch anything Robo related. I love Robo.
The Ultra Police really wet my whistle a few months ago, but no, we're watching Robotech, the Macross saga. Episode came out in 1985. The first episode, it's around. There's a whole bunch of different places to watch it. Harmony Gold is trying to do something about that, I would imagine. They're one of the companies that are extremely stringent about their rights and all that stuff. But take a look around, sync it up with us, and watch along as we give you a running commentary on the very first episode of Robotech. So I'll give you a countdown, 3, 2, 1, play. On play, you'll press play. Ready? 3, 2, 1, play. And we get that awesome fanfare. I tell you, the Valkyrie is one of the prettiest sci-fi jets of all time.
Yeah, it's got quite the history in terms of where it is in toy lore here in North America.
And my connection to Robotech, I didn't watch too many when I was a kid, but I always thought Jetfire whenever I saw this show.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The fact that, and there's one of the reasons you mentioned Harmony Gold,
yep.
And that's the problem. After that little hiccup, the fact that they weren't fast enough to get the rights.
I'm just picturing a T-shirt. Harmony Gold, that's the problem. Wasn't there an issue a few years ago with a San Diego Comic-Con Jetfire set? They repainted a G.I. Joe Sky Striker as Jetfire, and then I think they had to pull it, or there was legal action by Harmony Gold saying, "Hey, that looks too much like a Macross Valkyrie."
Well, there's the thing, right? Yeah, and you might as well start copywriting that. That's the problem. Right? We are talking about Harmony Gold here. They are fiercely if Nintendo sues everybody, Harmony Gold does it 3 times more. I think it's just crazy.
There's been some awesome restorations on this cartoon too.
Yeah.
I remember trying to watch it in years gone by. And, it was pretty rough because it was going off old VHS copies probably, but they remastered it a while back. And if any animated show from the 80s deserves to be remastered, this is at the top of the list because it's not just a pretty looking show. It's actually one of the most in-depth stories with death. One of the few cartoons of the 80s with people actually getting killed in it.
Yeah. Well, there are actually scenes in the show, particularly when they enter into space, where you actually do get glimpses of soldiers and people from Macross City, and they're just being sucked into space. They're just floating, and as a kid, you sort of see it, but you're not really thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of passes your mind. But then you watch it again 20 years later, and you're like, what the hell? Did that actually happen?
Because we grew up on Terminator and Aliens and Nightmare on Elm Street and other violent things, maybe even we saw Platoon, stuff like that. So I think as a kid, you don't really go, oh, this is animation. They shouldn't be doing that in animation. It's just, it's part of the story. But I don't think this was conceived as a toy line, was it? It's Robotech, and they happen to make toys based on the story instead of the other way around with Transformers.
So Japan, because Macross originally was from Japan. The way they do things there is differently, right? This is one of the few animes which didn't directly come from manga, but they did have plans to do toys as once the series became very, very popular. There was always, I think, an idea of getting toy line in there somewhere. But yes, you're right. It's not like
it wasn't like Transformers was a complete toy line with a catalog and names, and they say, okay, now make a show based on these toys.
Exactly, because as you and I talk about, on some of our channels, the 80s and a lot of these cartoons that came out of the 80s are always accused of being giant toy commercials. Yeah. That wasn't exactly the case in Japan. In Japan, they like to make good stories first, and then the fans usually follow after suit. So I don't think that there was originally a toy line. I don't believe that's true. I believe Robotech definitely came first, and then the toys came afterwards. Yeah.
And also very unique. I mean, it's not really an '80s North American cartoon. It's converted from a Japanese anime. There's the continuity between the episodes. It's not 65 one shots all made at the same time in order to get it into syndication like He-Man was and Transformers and G.I. Joe. This is basically like a modern day Netflix series where one episode leads into the next, and if you watch them out of order, you're in big trouble.
Well, it's interesting that you say that it wasn't to make the syndication run. That was actually the issue. Macross was just too short, like just too short to make the syndication minimum. So what Carl May had to do, along with Harmony Gold, was to actually take three different series, Macross, Mospeda, and Southern Cross, and amalgamate them into a singular timeline, right? And that's what a lot of people who were watching at the time sort of saying, okay, this is weird. That's her daughter, that's her son, right? They saw the progression of the story, but it really like after, as you said, it wasn't episodic, like Transformers. It did have a huge beginning and a middle and an end, but then after Macross ended, they had to actually sort of figure out a way to continue that story for another 3 seasons. It was kind of messed up.
Mm-hmm. We saw earlier a little G.I. Joe crossover, Admiral Keelhaul with the white captain's hat. Keelhaul never appeared in G.I. Joe, so I like to imagine that's him.
Yeah, but he doesn't wear that same suit again. I think that's the first and last time he wears his brown suit. So
have you seen the original Japanese version of this with subtitles?
Every now and again, I'll take a look at the first episode or even the movie, and it's kind of interesting because when you grow up with a certain version of the show, you sort of have, and I'm a huge anime fan, right? Like I love anime, but there are actually shows which I prefer watching in English rather than the original Japanese. The inflections really make things very, very different when you're watching it. It's actually kind of strange, but yes, I have watched on occasion a few episodes here and there, but not the whole series.
Do you think the biggest problem with English dubs is sometimes the dialogue just comes out so rushed? You're trying to squeeze in all of the dialogue there, and no one ever takes a breath.
So there was back in the 80s and back in the 90s when anime was finally starting to break through. I remember I was part of an anime club, and I used to hate watching the dubs whenever they came on because the scriptwriters, and I blame the scriptwriters more than I blame the dubbing crew, because I think that it takes a lot of courage to put your voice to a character. So I always said, you know what, the scriptwriters are writing and trying to get every piece of dialogue into the scene, but I think over time they've learned that you don't need, like, because we're a North American audience, you don't need to put every single phrase that's being said. You can actually cleverly rewrite it to a point where it still means the same thing, but you're getting the gist of what they're trying to say, right? Because we have our own ways of expressing ourselves, just like the Japanese do. So today it's a little bit more clever than back in the 90s.
Yeah, and I find there's advantages and disadvantages of both watching the subtitled original Japanese as well as watching the English dub. I just recently watched the TF Cog English dub of fan dub of Victory, the first episode of Transformers Victory. And it is so awesome to be able to watch the action without looking down to read and just focus on the action of the episode. So that's a huge advantage. One of the advantages of watching the Japanese version is those guys are intense. Like, even if you can't understand what they're saying, I love the English Grendizer, and thanks so much again for that amazing English dub set. But when you watch Grendizer in Japanese, it is so awesome.
Yeah, they give it's interesting because what's really funny is if you have any Japanese friends or have any Japanese movies or anything like that, you notice that most Japanese people are very reserved, right? Mm-hmm. So it's almost as if in anime and in movies and television, they can literally let themselves go. Yeah, wrestling, exactly. Yeah, the way those guys, they go at it. And the crazy thing about wrestling is it's not really fake in Japan, You know what I mean?
Yeah, photo
Like
wrestling.
when they hit themselves, they hit each other for real. Like not like
Yeah.
a lot of the times, right? Female wrestling in particular, it's crazy. You know,
Well, my favorite's Ken Kobashi, and wow, like those. Tell me that's fake. You know?
even wrestling, right, is not exactly fake, right? I mean, those guys are putting themselves in danger every night.
This Robotech thing is so exciting, I just couldn't give it up. It just gets in your blood or something. I
No,
don't
go
Especially
ahead.
the
know.
old timers like
It
Jack
is what it is.
Briscoe and Harley Race. Like, it might have been agreed upon. I won't say predetermined. That kind of just it does a disservice to what those guys did. I'll say agreed upon because I can just imagine Harley going, "It's a deal." But at the end, I'm sure all those guys felt like they were in a real fight, even if it
Yeah,
was agreed upon.
absolutely. And the thing is, they talk about the secrets of wrestling too, right? When somebody cracks somebody over the head, they need them to bleed. They're
Yeah,
really bleeding. You know what I mean? They don't
yeah.
have time to. They can't bring a blood pack into the ring. They don't have time for
Red
that,
means
right?
green, brother.
And that's the thing, right? So a lot of people don't really know what it takes to be a wrestler. It's and it's a disservice, as you said, it's a disservice for everybody. It's like, oh, it's all fake. It's not.
Yeah,
Get into a ring with anybody, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get
yeah. I
hurt
got a good
really, really bad.
I got a good story about Harley and a ketchup bottle. I'll tell you after this. But the animation in this episode is so beautiful. They really go above and beyond, not just with the character animation, but with the backgrounds too.
Yeah. So the the original toy animation, they they just went above and beyond in pretty much everything that they did, and a lot of these episodes were actually Gainax got their feet wet, trying to animate a few of these episodes as well. Um, a lot of the technical fight scenes, like anything that you see with the Valkyries or some of the actual pods, yeah, you can like they referenced a lot of dogfights from back in the day, and the missiles, the way they launch and the way they heat sink and everything like that.
Hmm.
They spent hours and hours and hours just researching how through film and through history, and that's why it's so exciting. You know what I mean? And here's a bit of trivia for you. Um, so Robotech actually came out in 1985, right? But Macross came out in 1983. And now when did Top Gun come out? I believe it was 1986, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. Um,
I think so.
so and don't and again, just playing devil's advocate here. A lot of If you actually look at a lot of the ways that Ridley, sorry, was it Tony Scott? Who was it?
Tony Scott. Yeah,
Tony Scott. If you look
yeah.
at the way Tony Scott actually did some of the fight sequences, some of the dog fights, it's almost as if, and again, I'm just being, I'm just putting it out there.
I agree. I agree. With where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's almost as if what they saw some of the other things that they were doing in Macross and other shows like that, and they're like, "Hey, I could use that." Right? I'm just saying. I
Yeah.
don't know. Just a little bit of conspiracy theory there, but
I think so too, because when I was watching this for the first time in a long time, I also thought that the dogfights were very cinematic and very unlike what you see in other animation at the time. Just the moments they give it. It's not just all quick action and quick cutting. Sometimes they will just take a moment and stop, and that's very cinematic because it's the let the actor act, especially the actor we just paid a lot of money for. Let him give him a moment, and that's not what they usually do with just an animated character sitting on the screen. But in a lot of anime, including this, like they'll just hold the camera on the character's expression, and it's limited for what you can do with an animated character. But still, the mouth is open and the eyes are wide, and you can just have a moment to connect with that character.
I think that's the biggest thing, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a true performance that they're trying to convey,
Hmm.
and it's something that's very difficult to do in animation. I think it's a little bit easier now with 3D animation. You can get those small little facial ticks and the a little bit more
Yeah.
expression, but it's amazing how the Japanese were trying to connect with their audience, and versus something like Spider-Man, at the time with Ralph Bakshi, where he had one still which didn't. You remember those old Spider-Man cartoons where literally like Spider-Man's holding on, Peter Parker's holding onto his hand for like a whole minute. He's like, something bit me. And he's still in that scene, but it was he was given a very low budget, and he did what he could with it, right? So
And even in this scene, if you just notice the little things here, like the brown-haired girl, there's the slow blink. It's a tiny thing, but it's a thing that they can do to kind of convey that this is kind of a peaceful, quiet character. A slower blink than a normal animated blink.
Yeah, you're talking about. Were you referring to Lisa, or were you referring to Claudia?
On the right. On the right there.
Yeah, Lisa. Yeah. And Lisa is that character until she doesn't have to be, because she does show that later in the series she becomes very, very because she has to be, right. She's got to command everybody on the deck, particularly when they're doing their sorties. She needs to make sure that actually we see that problem here. Rick here actually has to end up sortying, right? He has to take a sortie, and he does it incorrectly, and she ends up yelling at him, and they actually have a small back and forth over the comm. And it's actually an interesting little aside showing the relationship between the two later on the road. It's very interesting. And again, as you said, the Japanese weren't afraid to actually have interpersonal relationships compared to the way they would with North American kids shows, right? This is actually, it's funny that this is a kid show in Japan, but here this is a little bit more adult, and a lot adults can enjoy it as well, right? It's very interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot more substance to the relationships in this show than Spike and Carly, who just kind of liked each other, or even Flint and Lady J, who just kind of coyly, discreetly liked each other.
Yeah, I think there was a fear that over sexuality in cartoons was not good for kids because they were too young, right? Whereas in Japan. And that's what's really weird, because in Japan, public displays of affection are actually discouraged, right? Mm-hmm. So for them to actually showcase that in their popular culture, I think it speaks a lot about the kind of things that they want to express but can't, right? So they allow that.
Goes back to the repression you were talking about. It comes out in their art, in their animation, in their wrestling, in their the things that they're not allowed to do in reality. Oh, they don't hold back in their fantasy.
Exactly. And we talked about the animation. I mean, just the
every time I see this thing, I think Metroplex.
You want it to transform, right? And eventually it does, right? It's interesting how things influence each other, right? Because what was it called? What are they called? Diaclones, right? Diaclones were never supposed to be sentient robots, right? They were supposed to actually support the human pilots that they had.
Power suits.
Exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. They're huge, gigantic power suits, right? But Takara made a deal with Hasbro, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, what do we do with these things, right? And they said, okay, Marvel, come up with some stories for us. And Marvel said, okay, what? Why don't we make them sentient, robots? They can feel, they can talk, they can walk. And, that led into a cartoon series. And, oh my God, that just, look at us, like 40, 50 years later. Oh my God, is it almost 50 years now? That's just scary. Yeah. But yeah, look at it. People are so enamored with Transformers, right? And it's really interesting because the Japanese, who originally created these properties, they have to now license the permissions to use them in their own country. That's meta right there. I think that's crazy. That's ridiculous.
Think there's any chance of a Robotech Transformers crossover?
They've tried multiple times. I think there have been.
Let me guess what the problem is.
You got to copyright that. I think you got something really.
If
good.
I tried to do that shirt, you know how fast it would get pulled.
Exactly. That's the problem.
That's meta.
That's the problem, right?
That's the meta right there. Your shirt, your design has been pulled for copyright.
Exactly. Just crazy. But yeah, no, I think, and there's the issue, right? Because they already had not bad blood, but they already had their issues with Jetfire, right? That alone is like half the controversy, right? And it's interesting that they actually animated a version of Jetfire in the toy commercial, It literally is a
Right.
Valkyrie running around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, I mentioned that one in the Jetfire video that I did. Like, if you want a precious few seconds of Jetfire looking like a Valkyrie, he's in the commercial. And
Exactly.
then there was that blink and you miss it moment in one of the episodes where Skyfire actually does the gerwalk mode. His legs just stick out just for a second, and
Yeah.
every Transformers fan went, "What was that? Was
Yeah.
that Robotech?"
Exactly. I remember that too. And so here's that scene I was talking about. See how Lisa's actually like yelling at Rick and saying, "You got a sortie right now because we need you in the air." Right? He's
Yeah,
not even
it's a
supposed to be in there, right?
Luke Skywalker moment. I'll do my best. This thing's just like the Skyhopper back on Tatooine.
At least he had a briefing though. Rick didn't even
Yeah.
have a briefing. He's
Does
literally
he know
going.
how to fly this thing?
Roy gave him a crash course in 2 scenes ago.
In terms of entertainment, then he's almost an expert then.
Well, so Roy actually was a pilot in his circus, his dad's circus. Okay,
Hmm.
so Roy Fokker, who is his, he calls him his older brother, right? Because again, they grew up together, right?
Intercept invaders in zone 428.
I'm admiring that shot of the light reflecting off of Rick's helmet, and that's one of those let the actor act moments, even though it's just an animated face, but cutting to the extreme close-ups of the faces in the cockpits, it wasn't really done in animated dogfights. So it's definitely, I think Top Gun was influenced by this.
Yeah, yeah. I think that'll again. We say this all the time in design because like I'm a graphic designer, and the reality is there's nothing original anymore. You know, we we reference things that have been done in the past, and we try to put something of our of ourselves into it, to get the best out of it, right? Because
Mhm.
it's really, really, really hard to be original. You know what I mean? Like not that it can't be done. You look at things like The Matrix, before or Star Wars, right? Matrix or Star Wars, those are films which literally broke new ground, right? No one in the industry had ever thought of using stop motion animation to do dogfights. No one ever thought, at a cinematic level, in big budget films. So there's a scene where the two of them were actually in his dad's circus, right? Their flying
Yeah.
circus. So they had that, the version. And talk about humanistic moments, right? There was one of those moments he had a flashback about,
Yeah. It is like a Luke moment. He has pilot experience, so it's like Luke in a Skyhopper. It's not really an X-wing, but it's relatable. So
yeah,
now we know he does have some piloting experience.
yeah,
This is intense.
exactly, right? Again, this series in and of itself broke new ground for a North American audience as well. Here's something interesting too. Um, Lisa has to actually train him on what to do to get to gerwalk, to get into battle mode, right?
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that mode.
Yep.
Whoops. Any landing you can
You can
walk away from. Another happy landing.
Exactly. So
Beautiful.
we keep talking about how that's the problem, right? But Harmony Gold has been one of the singular reasons why many of the brand new, I'd like to call them masterpiece, Valkyries, have never made it across to North America. There have been so many different solo Chokogen and third party gerwalks that Valkyries that have been produced over the years, and it's because of Harmony Gold that they have not been allowed to actually be sold here in North America. It's really terrible. They only allow pretty much third party companies like what are these guys? Toynami, right? I happen to have one of the figures here. Yeah, and these are the only figures that are allowed to be released here in North America because they have exclusive licenses to them.
Yeah.
And it's only recently that they finally not lost the restriction, but steps are being made right now that Macross is actually being given back to the Japanese and more products are actually going to be allowed back into North America now. But Harmony Gold's still at it. They're still trying their best to because they tried to relicense it again for another 10, 20 years. It was crazy, and something's in the works where they're trying to block that. So yeah, it's crazy. The ongoing saga.
That's really unfortunate. I mean, it's to relate it to wrestling. It's kind of seems like they're the Fritz von Erich of the toy industry. It's like, let it grow. Everyone's dying for this product worldwide. Let it grow. Nope. We're sticking to our area. We're sticking to our territory. We don't cross lines.
Yeah, it's been very, and you know what? It's funny because there have been certain figures that did cross the line, as you said, and they were sued to high heaven. Like it was really, really sad. It really was an unfortunate set of circumstances. But getting back to the show, I mean, just watching that entire episode really brings back a lot of memories for me. You know, I remember the first time I saw Macross. It was on Saturday mornings, because here in Canada we could only watch it on WUTV, the Buffalo 29, right?
Yes,
I love that station. You know,
yeah.
that was my go-to. That and Channel 4, right? Those two stations were crazy. And I remember the very first time I saw it, I literally was blown away. I was like, what is this? Like the character designs look so huge, so adult. You know what I mean? They weren't.
That's exactly what I thought. They're like all these other cartoons, Silverhawks, Thundercats, all these cartoons going at the same time, and then Robotech to me was that adult show.
Yeah.
Even though it looked like it was cartoon for kids, it was all these serious themes and people getting killed, and no one was parachuting out of an exploding ship. They died. And I was like, I'll catch you down the road, Robotech.
Exactly. And what ended up happening was it became a little too adult for me. I remember thinking to myself, I was like, man, like after, like I was only there for the action.
Yeah.
That was a problem with me as a kid. I was only there for the action. And then once they started getting into, you know, the scenes, and regrettably, once they started getting to scenes where Min-Mei starts falling for Rick, and then Rick starts falling for Lisa, and then, you know, all these love triangle situations, which are huge in Japan, right? Once they started getting into those things, I remember saying, this is boring. She's got cooties. Why are they kissing? You know, like that's, again, I'm a kid, right? So I would switch between another show somewhere else, and then flop back and say, are they fighting yet? Right? I would just do one of the things. I would wait until they actually did the fighting. Then years later, like about, you know, when I was in college and high school, I remember going back and I'm like, wow, this show's deep. You know what I mean? It's so great to be watching this years later. And then I got hooked, and I started, you know, I started watching it from beginning to end. And then I tried to get into Southern Cross and Mospeada, and I was like, the connection just wasn't there, because I knew instinctively, I knew something's wrong here. Like they're not the same series. They're on different planets, for crying out loud. It's really crazy. Although so, but Macross, you know, Macross is the one that I really acclimated towards. Like that was huge for me. So it really has good memories for me, you know, in terms of like that. And it had powerful moments. You know, they weren't afraid, they weren't shy about, you know, doing certain things. Like when Roy died, oh my God.
Spoilers. Sorry, everyone.
Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that.
No, I'm kidding, man.
Yeah.
40-year-old show has no spoilers.
I know. It's just crazy. But when that happened to Roy, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, but Claudia was right there with him, right? And I remember thinking to myself, holy crap. It was one of those somber moments as a kid, a young person, because I wasn't a kid at the time when it happened, because I stopped watching it, right? But I remember watching it, I'm like, whoa, right? It was like that same.
He doesn't come back.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He doesn't pull an Optimus.
Well, here's the thing, right? I remember watching G.I. Joe the movie, and I remember the first time I saw Serpentor, like, you know, gripping that snake, tossing it towards Falcon, and then here comes Duke in a, you know, super heroic moment, and I saw the whole screen goes red. I'm like, what just happened here?
The game has changed.
Why is the screen red? Right? And then, you know, you see he's fallen back. He's like, Falcon's on the floor, and you see the blood trail, and I was like, what? I was like, what is that? Right? And then he, you know, that whole dialogue and everything like that, and I was like, what is going on? And originally, apparently, Duke was not supposed to come back. But I think originally the story goes that because what happened to Optimus the year before, they had to quickly
the
pivot.
moms.
Yeah, they had to pivot in order to not do the same thing. So he went
It
to
was
a
the
coma.
attack of the moms.
Yeah, exactly. He went into a coma, and then right at the end they did that thing. Right? It was great.
It's a running joke on all the commentaries on my channel. Anytime someone is definitely killed, it's a coma. that's a definite coma right there. You know, like Unicron at the end of the Transformers the movie when he explodes, and he's in a coma, which actually he is, because
He is.
his head does awaken in season 3. So.
Yeah. If it isn't for the ghost of Starscream, right? I mean, like, you know.
You've seen the whole series of Robotech, and
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure you would highly recommend watching the rest of the series. to all the
Absolutely,
folks out there listening
100%.
who haven't seen the
Like,
whole thing.
If it still holds up today, you know, the interpersonal relationships, the animation, surprisingly, it really does hold up today. Now, I'm not going to say it's as crisp or as detailed as like computer CGI or anything like that, right? I mean, like today we have so many different tricks and tools to actually make things look incredibly detailed. But what really does it for Macross and for Robotech, even the whole series as well, is it really is the story. The whole story of you know, the Zentradi, right? You know, the protoculture, you know what I mean? Why they end up in space, you know, how they end up in space, and their journey to get from space back to Earth, and you know, the whole interpersonal relationships that happen in between, like, you know, what happens with Mira, and what happens with Max, and what happens with Claudia, what happens with Roy, and eventually what happens between Min-Mei, Rick, and Lisa. These are really, really compelling stories. And as you said, those quiet moments, right? Like, you know, not to jump ahead too far, but, you know, there's scenes where people are stuck, you know, after tragedies, and all of a sudden they have to find their ways out, but they're actually alone for a long amount of time. And, you know, there's a lot of reflection, a lot of human moments. And as you said, it's a show which really is actually pretty poignant for today, I think, because there's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of isolation for all these people stuck in the middle of space, right? They can't see their families, can't communicate with anybody. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting tale, even today. So yeah.
For a show called Robotech, it's actually not about Robotech at all. That just happens to be, you know, the vehicles that they fly around in, but it's about the people.
Well, that's the thing. So obviously, it's about the Robotech technology, which hooks you, right? It's kind of like Grandizer is not about Grandizer, right? Grandizer is about Duke. It's about Duke Fleet, right? It's about Duke Fleet. It's about Johnny Quest, Orion Quest, right? Johnny
Orion Quest. I love that's his battle cry. It's just his name. Me. Why doesn't he just say that? Me.
I think the idea is he's going from Johnny Bryant to transmutating into Orion Quest.
Orion Quest.
Because he's living. It's like a Batman moment. You know, but Batman doesn't go Batman. He goes, I'm Batman.
That's funny.
It's interesting though, right? Because and you know,
She-Ra does that actually though. I am She-Ra.
Yeah, He-Man says I have the power, right? But
in the comments, hit us up with more superheroes that call out their own name to transform into their super version.
There are actually quite a few. As far as I know, there are actually quite a few people who no, I think you're right. There actually aren't that many. Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Do you, when you turn into your super version, do you yell out Mega J Retro?
Voltron does, technically. You know? Yeah. Don't you remember? Like every now and then, you'll hear Keith and the whole team. As soon as they finish transforming, they go Voltron. You ever seen it? Yeah. Every now and then, not always, but every now and then they all yell it. It's interesting. Do I say yeah? Absolutely. Every morning I get up and it's like Mega J Retro's ready for the day. That's what happens
when I get out of bed. I'm kind of like Voltron. Knees engage, ankles on.
You can hear
said ankles on,
and you can hear the joining of the joints, right? Crack.
Yeah.
Crack.
Yeah. Shoulder go. Okay, never mind. Go one arm like defensor.
It's a classic Japanese trope though to like announce the move you're gonna make before you make it, right? Like
Yeah.
blazing sword.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. Like I said, I didn't get through it the last time. I started watching a whole bunch of these just because other stuff pops up. Voltron popped up on Netflix. That was an amazing series too. But I do remember the second episode vividly. That's the one where the arm gets ripped off of the Valkyrie during the fight there, and I remember just marveling at the beautiful animation and the give you a moment to just absorb. You know, they're in a really breakneck speed, quick moment, and they slow time down so that you can just see what's actually happening. It's not a blink and you miss it type of thing.
Well, you know,
Beautiful cinematography.
They're literally free falling, right? And you know the tension, right? First of all, there's the tension, but then you're just like you have
especially
to
since he doesn't know how to use the thing yet. It's a simple motion, but he doesn't know how to do it. So it's like, is he gonna crush her?
Yeah. There's the part with the manipulator, but there's also the part where they're free falling, both of them, right? And he's got to get like he opens up the canopy to try and, you know what I mean? Like there's so many moments in there where they're just trying, like he's just trying to figure it out, right? He's not competent using the Valkyrie yet, or the gerwalk, or any of the modes, and you know, just get her in the cockpit. Like, I just didn't understand. Just get her in the cockpit. Like, why? But then what happens after that in the next episode is even crazier, right? Because all of a sudden they find themselves somewhere else, and they're running at oxygen becomes a little bit of a problem, right? So again, great setup, great series. I recommend it to anybody who has not seen it yet, or used to watch it, says, hey, I'd like to watch that again. You know what? There's so many places to go watch it. I thought it was on Amazon. I checked. It's not. I thought it was on Netflix. I checked. It's not. I do believe it's still on Hulu.
It used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be on Netflix.
Yeah.
Guess what the problem was? Well,
the license ran
out. We'll see if we have a problem talking about it and maybe trying to show some stills of it. I have a feeling we might have a problem.
No,
we'll see what we can do about it.
I don't think they care about stills. It's when you actually start showing clips, like outside, like they like my whole Robotech episode's still on, like, and I have a few clips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't usually give you too much of a hard time, but it's when you start showing other products that are not in their wheelhouse, then they're kind of like, hey, you're not supposed to show that, right? So that's where it kind of gets to be a little thing. You know, little guys like this, which are officially licensed, you know what I mean? They don't say guff about that. Like, they encourage that, right? But anything else, they're kind of like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should know better. It is what it is.
Well, Jay, thanks so much for joining on this commentary, and I hope we can do another one.
Well, Michael, thank you again for inviting me. Happy Thanksgiving to you and to all our Canadian viewers out there.
Thank you very much.
American Thanksgiving not too far away.
This will be a little after that, but that's when we're recording it. So yeah, happy Thanksgiving to all the Canuckleheads out there, the Ontarians, fellow Ontarians.
It might be in time for the American Thanksgiving then. You never know.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Enjoy Survivor Series.
Who's in it this year?
I have no idea. I haven't watched WWE all year. I'm an AEW guy.
I was about to say, are you into AEW? Because,
oh my God.
Because it's... How
could you not be?
Oh, man. You know what? I've always said this. Competition is good. You know, when you only have one guy in the game, it gets stale. It gets stale so much. And a lot of these guys are moving over to AEW anyway. You know what I mean? Like all the classic guys who were just journeymen, right, in the WWE. Now they're just having a second life over here in AEW, right? You know what I mean? It's crazy. And they're better storylines. You know, people are more invested in the characters, right? And people care, right? People really, really are looking towards this. It's good. It's good.
And for being a brand new organization, it feels old school. Like Kenny Omega has defended his belt under 10 times, something like that, and it's amazing. It feels like, well, hasn't he defended it thousands of times? No, like every title match has been special. There hasn't been any rematch. And that match he had with Bryan Danielson a few weeks ago, the time limit draw, is one of the best matches I've seen in forever. And it was just a TV time limit draw, but it was special. Like, they are making wrestling special like it was in the 80s and, some of the 90s too.
But that's the thing about
an AEW.
Yeah, but that's the thing about having another, a completely different look at things, right? It's I think WWE has had its day. You know what I mean? Like Vince has pretty much exhausted every idea he's had, and the real problem is that you know I don't think they're ever going to be dethroned. They're just too big for that right now. But if you have somebody else coming into the game, they add something to it. You know, and all of a sudden, WWE has to either up their game or they have to just stay where they are. And you know what? It's going to be You know what? I liken it to what happened when WCW first entered the game, right? They dominated for the longest time, and what happened? Eventually, whether it was financial difficulties or mismanagement or whatever it was, right? Eventually Vince came in and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm doing a lingerie strip off. I'm doing this. I'm doing that." You know what I mean? Like he started doing some crazy things, and he said, "You know what? I'll just buy you up, and we'll bring the family back together," kind of thing. And they've been like that for forever now, right? So.
And to bring it back to Robotech, I guess you could say Harmony Gold is kind of like AEW. Transformers is the WWE. But I'd highly recommend this show wherever you can find it. Track it down because it really does feel like a modern show. It does not move and feel and look like an 80s show at all. And even though it's traditional cell animation, they can't do this today. Even if they wanted to. I mean, the closest they can come still looks and feels a little CGI. This is it's cell animation, but it's kind of like that Brave Star movie by Filmation. It's like, how did they hand animate this? How much time must this have taken?
Yeah.
So each episode had to have had so much more time put into it than wouldn't be surprised if one episode of Robotech was several episodes of any other show.
It's interesting watching these older cartoons, and really, you don't think about it, right? But when if you actually go back in the past and you start looking at just how much dedication there was to actually that one scene where that one ship, it gets hit, and you see all the particle effects, right? Today we would do this with computers, right? The computer would think about it mathematically, and everything would dissipate. But it would be done in 2 hours, whatever. We're talking about somebody literally taking, hand drawing that every single piece. One frame is here, then they do one, then another piece is here. But think about how many pieces flew away, and it took 3 seconds to do it. Man, that's 4 days, 4 days of work just for that one scene. It's absolutely incredible, and we really do have to thank those people for bringing that type of imagination. To actually think about the way that would have been done, and then other people looking at that, it's like, that's awesome. I'm going to use that in my film, right? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Tony Scott.
You don't really, you don't really appreciate it until something becomes a lost art. So that's another reason I think it's important to watch a show like Robotech. It's a lost art. They can't do it anymore. Even the shows that love this show and homage it, they can't do it. They're working with computers now. So that's another big reason I like to watch and just go, wow, how did they do that? Because they didn't have the schedule that Sunbow had. You got to crank these out because we've got the toy line hitting the shelves in September or whenever.
Or the budget.
So
when you really think about it, they didn't have the budget. They really didn't. And Mikimoto's designs are very unique. The character designer. The characters don't, as we talked about earlier, the characters don't exactly look like any other characters you've seen on television, right? They're very, very unique in that, right? And they have that humanistic quality about them. And and as you said, the show has these wonderful, wonderful moments where you see a lot of human interaction and just these, as you said, quiet moments where there's a lot of reflection and a lot of personal crisis for a lot of the characters. They have that moment where they have to decide, am I going to continue with what I'm doing right now? Or am I going to abandon everything and go on my own? There's a lot of that in Macross, and that's, I think, why it's stood the test of time. Because a lot of people they project. A lot of people project about a lot of things that happen in Macross to themselves as well, because they can relate with the characters. The characters are all really, really relatable, and I think that's actually why a lot of people still watch Macross even to this day.
Yeah, they're using those timeless themes in them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so hope everyone out there enjoyed listening along to this commentary. Once again, Jay, thank you so much for joining me on this one.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me, and once again, have a happy Thanksgiving. Hope you and everybody out there is doing well and staying safe.
Thank you, and want to give a shout out to your channel over on YouTube. It's Mega J Retro, so head over there and check out some of Jay's awesome videos on there as well. I'll put a link for it in the show notes. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care and Nerdmas Day.
Nerdmas Day, everybody.